Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. We're pleased to have on the program today a guy who's been on before but not in his current role as a U.S. Congressman. Ruben Gallego is the newly elected representative from District 7. That's Ed Pastor's old district. Ed was a frequent guest on the program. A guy who didn't do a lot of TV interviews, but Ed always would come on this program, and I appreciate it.
Man, yeah.
And I hope we continue the relationship as well.
Would love to.
Gallego, great to see you.
Thank you.
You were in the Arizona House of Reps. You were the minority leader from 2012 until you ran.
Assistant minority leader. Yep.
Assistant minority leader. Tell me so far how the learning curve has been in the House of Representatives. I'm curious.
Well, it is a steep learning curve. You know, you deal a lot with leadership and leadership of both houses. You're guided a lot by what the caucus already is working on and momentum that's been picking up even steam even before you got there.
Right.
And it's a much bigger world you're playing in. You know, in the House I had 60 House of Representatives I had to work with. In the House of Representatives for Congress, I have 435.
Right.
So you know,
and in your party, it's what?
About 188.
188. Yeah.
And so the numbers get even harder to play with, but you have to figure out where you can do the most, the biggest impact for your states.
First impression of going in there, is it as dysfunctional as we've been told?
It's not as dysfunctional, but it is disheartening because I think there's a lot of good members of Congress that do want to work together and want to get you know, things done for this nation. But you know, we are really being held hostage by a really small minority of members of Congress on the right who are really holding up everything. And when I say small, I want to say in the 30s. But they really do have enough strength that it really holds up, you know, Speaker Boehner from working.
It holds up their caucus.
It holds up their caucus, which in turn holds up.
So then Boehner can't move things forward because he's got 30 guys on the far right who are saying, no, I'm not going to go along with this.
Absolutely. Now,
give me a couple issues where that's really been important.
Well, you'll see two issues, right? For example, the funding for Homeland Security, where I think Boehner realized that this is not a fight that they wanted to take up. He wanted to fund Homeland Security. He wanted to make sure to continue funding DACA and DACA recipients, you know, dreamers being able to stay in this country. His caucus pulled him to the right, tried to shut down Homeland Security funding, and in the end, he had to come in and cut a deal with us Democrats, and we, of course, worked with them. Second part was the Medicare doc fix, which is how we pay our doctors and our, a lot of people.
Big issue.
Been a big issue year over year. We finally did a permanent fix. And that ended up being a compromise where Speaker Boehner and Leader Pelosi worked together, and we got enough votes to really get momentum behind it, and it passed with overwhelming numbers.
We're going to change direction a little bit here. Cue up tape number 2, Nancy Pelosi. I want to get your take first, though, on John Boehner.
Okay.
How do you like him? What do you think of the job he's doing? He's getting assailed from the right. He gets it from all sides, but he survives.
He does.
And why is that? Just, you're a smart guy. What is it about Boehner and his political acumen that has allowed him to weather this? It's a very difficult situation he's in.
Well, he is a smart guy, and he is, you know, a decent guy too. I don't think anybody really wants the job. It's hard to control that caucus. I think he's one of the few that can at least control the caucus in a manner that they can still be effective to push the Republican agenda. And there's really not anybody else who can really take his place.
Can you have a civil conversation with him?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So he's very approachable.
Extremely approachable, and most of my colleagues on the right are very approachable as well as your Democrats are.
Okay, tape number 2, Nancy Pelosi. I just want to get your take on Pelosi because, you know, she's been caricatured, and sometimes I have to be honest with you, Republican, Democrat, she seems a little unhinged sometimes.
Oh really?
Yeah, I mean, she seems a little, you know, out there. What's your take on Nancy Pelosi?
She's whip smart. I mean, I've been very impressed working with her. She has really got the grasp on all the issues, and you know, I think people demonize her a lot, partly because she's a woman in politics, she's a powerful woman in politics, and also because it's just plain politics. But she really knows how to run a caucus, and we saw her effect when it came down to Homeland Security funding. She made Speaker Boehner break. You know, she compromised a good deal with Medicare, the Medicare doc fix. So there's just a lot more of that coming, but yeah, I am impressed by her, and I think she doesn't get as much credit that she deserves. And look, this is the woman who got the Affordable Health Care Act passed. Now, you may not like the Affordable Health Care Act if you're a Republican or if you're a conservative, but as a Democrat and as a progressive, we've wanted some version of the Affordable Health Care Act for years, and she got in there and she got it done.
Do you believe that the Affordable Care Act, as we know it, will be largely changed and reshaped going forward?
I think the Affordable Health Care Act, as we know it, will be bettered in the future. I don't think it will be changed dramatically to the point where we don't see it, but I think the areas where it's going to need improvement, it will happen. You know, the next big case, the Supreme Court case, King versus Burrow,
Right.
once we get beyond that, and I think it will be upheld, I think we will continue to have the subsidies for you know, the Affordable Health Care Act. I think we'll continue, now we'll then move on to the phase of just kind of continually fixing it to really to perfect it. No government program, when it's initially started, is perfect. And nobody says that the Affordable Health Care Act is perfect. But we do have to go and fix it. But we have to do it with the understanding that we want it to last forever and not an attempt to subterfuge it like the Republicans have.
If there was one issue, if there were one issue that you would really want to attack going forward right now, you're in the minority in the House, which is a tough spot to be in. What would that be? What is the next issue on the horizon that we have got to get under control?
We really have to get under control college affordability.
Is that something the marketplace should dictate, or is it something Congress should wade into?
Well, I think it's something we should wade because we actually dictate the market, because we give out so many loans and so many subsidized loans.
It's created a lot of the problem,
It's
right?
created a lot of the problems. A lot of these schools are basically, instead of dealing with the situation, either talking to the legislatures about raising the funds so they don't have to raise tuition. What they end up doing is they just raise tuition knowing that parents and students will take out the student loans. We're causing this problem, and this is going to affect the economy. If young men and women are more worried about their student loan debt than they can buy a car, can buy a home, or start a business, the economic output of this country is going to reduce. We have a little time to fix it, but if we let this continue to go on, we are going to find ourselves in a very serious problem in 5 to 10 years.
You went to Harvard.
Yep.
Did you go into debt to do it?
I did. I went into, to be honest, about $10,000 to $12,000 debt, which is not bad compared to many other young men and women. It took me about 8 years to pay it off. And we still have, my wife and I combined have student loan debt from her education.
Kate,
too.
who's a Phoenix City Councilwoman.
Yeah, so we're paying that off currently
Political
now.
family.
Political family, yes.
Tell me about a little bit, so folks know a little bit about Ruben Gallego. We learned about you a little bit in the campaign. A lot of people thought Mary Rose Wilcox was going to just kind of waltz into this position. That was a tough, hard-scrabble campaign.
It was, yeah.
What was it about, and I've heard stuff on the ground that it was really your energy, that you just outworked everybody.
Well, I mean, it is not just that I outworked everybody. I really had a team of people that really believed in me, young men and women, and actually people from all walks of life that really came in and volunteered. And I jumped in right away as soon as the race opened up, because I believe that if you want people to believe in you, you have to prove that you're 100% in. And whatever I do, I always put 100% in. And I'm here because I worked hard, but I'm definitely here because I had support from thousands of people in the community that worked hard also on my behalf.
You also served this country before you ever served in this capacity. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, it was, the proudest thing I've done is serving in the United States Marine Corps. And, I met some of the best men this country's ever produced. I lost some really good friends, and it really has shaped my life. But
You get emotional talking about it.
I do get emotional. It's not an easy thing to deal with, and a lot of veterans will understand that. But I am proud of my service, and I could never imagine my life not doing it, not serving my country.
How do you feel about what's happened with the VA, and do you think they're making progress?
Well, I think the VA is continually making progress, but I am disappointed at the pace of change. When I first got back from Iraq, a lot of my activism started because of how a lot of us were treated at the VA.
So this got you into politics?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. A lot of us were being not treated as well. It took me forever to get some of the services that I needed from the VA. Some of us were told that we never actually served in combat because our records weren't updated. It was really bad. I had members of my unit that were contemplating suicide because the VA told them they weren't going to serve them because they weren't in combat, because their service records showed they weren't in combat. There was all these things.
So they serve their country and they come back and they're put into a bureaucratic nightmare.
Right. Yeah, and it's for us.
It's disheartening.
It's disheartening, and well, especially for us as veterans, because they're very quick to get us to war, but they're not very quick to get us help. And now the VA, I will say this, has got some people that really do care. The workers that are there, the everyday workers, your nurse practitioners, your doctor specialists, they do care about the veterans. The problem you have is a shortage issue. You have all these veterans that are coming back, millions of veterans that have served in the last 10 years, and now they're starting to use services. But we haven't expanded the VA as fast as we should. You know, we've had problems with PTSD and suicide and the link between both, but we haven't actually brought in as many mental health care clinicians as we need to actually meet with that demand.
Let me ask you about, dovetails off your military service, and I mean this with all sincerity. We, as a military guy, we are entering an era, and it's happened under President Obama, where I feel that the country is trying to disengage from some of these entanglements. Afghanistan, Iraq. As a military guy, and you served in Iraq, there is also a downside to disengaging from the rest of the world. Do you think we're in that debate? We're going to hear it a lot during the presidential campaign coming up. What's your take on that? Is there a downside to trying to say, hey, and there's even guys like Rand Paul on the Republican side say, look, we shouldn't be involved in this stuff. But every time historically we disengage, bad things happen.
Well, every time in history where we do engage, bad things happen.
That's true.
I mean, a lot of these things have occurred because we actually got engaged and we really overthrew a lot of the national order. But not engaging,
there's this feeling that by not engaging, everybody will play nice and everybody will get along, and the world doesn't work that way.
The world doesn't work that way, but you know, we took Iraq, invaded Iraq under false pretenses, tore apart a country, and only empowered Iran in that process, right? That's us doing bad kinds of engagements. Smart engagements, we should get involved when it's in direct national interest of the United States to protect our sovereignty and our national interests. For example, Afghanistan. Afghanistan was clearly a bane on the world, where it was a safe haven for terrorists. I think for now, the most important thing we could do with Afghanistan is step back from the front lines, be there in support services, assure that Afghanistan starts rising, and that's a good plan.
That's what we're doing. Do you think we've been too quick to pull out of Iraq? And the reason I say that is, you know, there were elections there. You could talk about the validity, people with purple thumbs. They seem to be making progress. You guys spilled blood and treasure there. And I feel like we were in a hurry to get out of that, and that we might have been able to hang on and get that thing squared away if we hadn't pulled out so quickly.
I think that people forget the history of why we pulled out. Iraq refused to sign a status forces agreement with the United States. Status of forces agreements with the United States are extremely important because we're not going to subject uniformed military Americans to Iraqi justice. And that is, any country we occupy, we always have a status force agreement. Two, they had an established military. They had tanks, they had everything. What we did not account for was the amount of corruption that was going to take place that would hollow out the military to the point where something like ISIS could come in and basically roll them over. The reason ISIS occurred is because the Iraqi military and the government became so corrupt. It was functional on many levels, but at the base level, it was never going to be able to withstand something like ISIS. And the way they planned for their own national security, they were always planning for maybe some kind of incursion from Iran. But Iran would never attack Iraq with the United States' interests there. It was such a, in my opinion, it was such an oversight by everybody. But most importantly, it was because the Iraqi government itself corrupted itself.
How did your experience in the military shape the way you will approach your role in Congress when it comes to votes on use of military force?
Well, unlike many people in the military, I was actually at the bottom of all the orders. So if you were a general, by the time your order to execute was given, it had gone through so many layers, and I was the guy that was actually executing, carrying it out. And I was at the, you know, with the Marines and the infantry, we were the tip of the spear. So we're the ones that were kicking in the doors, you know, dragging out the high-value targets that we're supposed to, or engaging the enemy wherever we had to. So when I think about in the military, I think about it from my viewpoint as the guy all the way at the bottom looking up at these orders from generals and politicians and realizing that there's complexity to this. And not only is there complexity, there's a lot of sacrifice that occurs. And I think there's a lot of policymakers and people with a lot of stars on their shoulders that really don't understand the everyday life of an infantryman and the hard work that we do and the very dangerous work we do.
We got to take a break. Thank you for your service, by the way, to this country. We're back with Congressman Ruben Gallego. He is a first-term congressman from Arizona District 7, Ed Pastor's old district. We're back with Congressman Gallego in a minute. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with first-term congressman from Arizona District 7, Democrat Ruben Gallego, taking over for Ed Pastor, who retired last year. Good of you to join us.
Thank you.
You've been embroiled in this, and we can run tape number one. I don't know where to begin on this FAA business, the change of the flight paths. It has turned into a nightmare for residents in these historic neighborhoods. This is right in your area.
Well, and not just historic. South Phoenix, Laveen have also been affected by this. All of my district.
What is going on here?
You know, the FAA basically a few years ago passed legislation that basically allowed it to skip the public notice process when you change lanes, takeoff and landing lanes, and that's exactly what occurred here. They notified lower level city employees and state employees.
The historic commission and stuff like that.
But if they had actually done a public hearing process, they would see what we're seeing now.
They would have gotten an earful.
Right, that the residents of the historic district and of South Phoenix Laveen do not want this. And now do they want this? It is difficult to even be out there in the backyard with many of these residents.
Is this in an area where you live? Have you personally
I have
seen
lived there before, but I have friends that also live there now, and when I go visit them, I mean, I see it. Yeah, and it's not one plane. We're not talking about one plane every 3 hours. We're talking sometimes intervals of every 5 minutes. There's another plane.
How loud is it?
It's, we have to stop talking. We would if we were outside, we'd have to stop having a conversation. And that's not a place to live. That's not a way for us to live, and that's not a way for the residents of South Phoenix or the historic district to live.
The FAA is a powerful agency. However, you guys do control their purse.
We are going to have to remind them about that. And the one benefit I have is that I am 35, and so I will be in Congress for a long, long time. And I'll also remind them about that.
Well, I suppose you could end up in the Senate, but it's the same difference, right?
Either way, I will be still looking at, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Do you think you're going to get the FAA to relent on this?
I think I'm going to do everything I can, and I hope to be able to do it. I mean, it's not fair to these residents.
But wherever they fly, correct? They're going to interrupt somebody.
No, there are ways for them to do this. They could go over the highway. They could go at a higher elevation over the highway. There's not even any kind of penalties if you actually do violate the flight plan. So even the flight plan that they have right now, which goes up Grand Avenue, that's affecting the historic district, it doesn't actually have any kind of penalty if they start crossing over. So some of these planes are actually going up Grand Avenue, and to cut costs and corners, what they'll do is they'll just cut right through the Willow neighborhood and some of these other historic neighborhoods away from the flight plan. But there is no way to find them.
This would be the airlines doing this to save money on fuel.
Absolutely, but there's no way to find them because there's nothing in the FAA that says you have a right to find them. That's something that we're looking at right now to see if we could find a way to actually find them.
This is one of the places where I suspect residents feel like government is working against them.
Well,
they're not included in the process. This just happens and like, what is going on?
Right.
What is
overnight
happening?
Yeah.
Who decided this? And then when they try to bring it to the agency that's responsible, FAA has bunkered in yet again on this issue.
And not just here, but in other cities. And yes, their FAA is working against the citizens. Right now, I have joined with about 20 other members of Congress. We are part of what's called the Quiet Skies Caucus, which are other Congress members and cities that have been affected by these changes of the flight patterns on the FAA. And we're going to get together and put legislation that we think will end up making a big difference on this.
They traditionally, if they change, it changes at a glacial pace. It's insane to move that bureaucracy on stuff like airspace.
Well, they seem to be able to move it very fast. That affected the residents of South Phoenix and historic district.
Good point.
So at the same time, I don't think it's that difficult for them to change it.
How is it being married to another politician? Your wife, Kate Gallego, who's on the Phoenix City Council. I mean, you guys are embroiled in issues and stuff all the time.
It's hard. It sounds weird, but I don't think Kate, as a politician, I don't think she thinks of me as a politician. We've been together since she was 20 and I was 22. I mean, she first met.
How'd you guys meet?
She bought me at a date auction. Yeah. And
no kidding.
Yes. One of our friends encouraged her to bid on me, and then we kind of just hit it off on our first date. But the first she knew of me as a Marine, actually, because I was one of the few Marines at Harvard.
Did you, a lot of these guys, they live in their office in Congress. Are you doing that?
No, I have a really small place about the size of a walk-in closet.
How far away from Capitol Hill?
2 to 3 blocks, so I could get there, go to work, get there on time.
And you try to come back every weekend?
I come back. I think I've come back every weekend except for one so far.
Tell me, we got a minute left in this segment. For the life of a congressman, when you do that on Friday, you come back. Is it immediate town halls and meetings with constituents in your district?
I usually fly on Thursday, and usually if there's a charity dinner, I'll go to that. And then on Fridays, I go right into meetings town halls I usually have on Saturdays, and then I have other meetings with community meetings throughout the weekend.
Do you get any downtime?
Sunday afternoon, usually they let me free.
Really, without exception, people in Congress have told me, and I've witnessed it, they work very, very hard.
We do. I mean,
people are going to take exception to that comment.
Yeah.
They're going to say, oh, these people are all on the take, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But they work, if they're doing it right, they're working hard.
I mean, most of our work that you see in Congress that has nothing to do with voting. It has to do with our interaction with other agencies for our constituents or businesses or organizations in our district.
Your committee that you're on, the top committees?
Armed Services and then the Natural Resources. And I chose both of them because they're very important to Arizona.
We got to take a break. Ruben Gallego, the first-term congressman from Arizona District 7, is our guest. We're back in a minute on Newsmaker Sunday. Immigration, we've got 2 minutes.
Yep.
You have called on Governor Ducey to stop on the business with licenses, right?
Yeah, with license and also with the tuition out of state, making our Dreamers pay out of state tuition.
Where are we on this in Arizona right now?
You know, for the Dreamers, I think we're getting closer to driver's licenses. You know, there's still some appeals going on there, but
give me the best case for why somebody here illegally should have a driver's license.
Well, one, because they aren't here illegally. At this point, they have status.
Right.
This is
now they do.
Yeah, this is people that are have received deferred action from their from the
Was
government.
that a wise approach by the president?
I think so. I think so. We need to take a lot of these people out of the shadows. You know, they're working. They're trying to go to school. They're trying to start businesses. Why are we going to punish them? Let's give them a pathway to do this.
Then why have, Congressman, why have so few Dreamers applied in the states that do allow driver's licenses? Why have so few applied? They fought for it. Very few have applied for driver's licenses.
You know, a lot of them just aren't driving. A lot of them are young. A lot of them are use public transportation. They don't have the wherewithal to buy a car to also get a driver's license. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't make sure they have the option, because eventually, as they get older, as they get more income, they're going to want to get a driver's license. And I know a lot of Dreamers, a lot of good friends of mine that are Dreamers that have gotten their driver's license, and it makes a whole difference, a lot of difference. A lot of them now have their cars and they pay insurance. Before, some of them were even driving without a driver's license, without insurance, and that's never good for anybody.
Where are we going with this debate? We've got 30 seconds left. Do you see movement on immigration reform in this country anytime soon?
I don't see movement with immigration reform, because the presidential politics of the Republicans running the presidential primary, most of them are against comprehensive immigration reform, save for maybe one. They don't want to have to talk about this, and that's why I think we're not going to deal with comprehensive immigration reform until after the primary. After the presidential election.
Can we have you back?
Of course, anytime.
Great to see you.
Good to
Congressman
see you,
Ruben Gallego, our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. Great to see you, and we'll
Thank you.
see you next week on Newsmaker Sunday.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and get all the best videos from Fox 10.